Vault 76. This sprawling underground shelter may have been engineered by Vault Tech, but it was built by you. So that if the bombs do come, our way of life will endure.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is all there, older than the trees, younger than the mountains, blowing like the breeze. Country roads, take me home to the place. West Virginia, Mountain Mama, take me home.
Alright, so at this point, you know Fallout 76 is bad. I know it, you know it, hell, Todd Howard himself probably knows it at this point. So rather than just beat a dead horse and hate on the game like everybody else has done, I thought it'd be a good idea to dissect what exactly it is that brought us here before discussing why this game fundamentally doesn't work and is so irredeemably broken. Now a quick history lesson for those of you who don't know. Fallout was originally created by a studio called Black Isle Studio, a subset of Interplay back in the late 90s, with Fallout 1 in 1997 and Fallout 2 in 1998 being the first contributions to the series. You know, because that's how numbers work. After this, however, they would go on to create Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel in 2001 and then would be closed by Interplay. Now Interplay would then go on to publish Fallout Brotherhood of Steel in 2004, which would go on to be universally panned by critics and fans alike. Now hoping to bring Fallout back from this blunder, Interplay began working on what was supposed to become Fallout 3, oftentimes simply referred to by its development codename Fallout Van Buren. Due to a large amount of delays and setbacks in production, however, Interplay would eventually sell the rights to Fallout to Bethesda Game Studios, where it would fall into the hands of now legendary game director Todd Howard. Now Bethesda worked on a new Fallout title for a few years, eventually releasing into the world Fallout 3 as we know today, without any involvement from Black Isle Studios or Interplay. Now this new game would focus more on action and combat than its predecessors, with a new first/third-person view, along with new real-time combat, a stark contrast to the previous third-person isometric view and turn-based gameplay of its predecessors. This reimagined Fallout 3 was well received. So well received, in fact, that it prompted Bethesda to request a sequel to it immediately to cash in on the hype. However, Todd and his team were already working on what was to become The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim, so Bethesda outsourced the game to a studio called Obsidian Entertainment, which housed many of the previous employees of Black Isle Studios who had worked on the older Fallout games. These individuals would go on to develop what's widely considered the best of the modern Fallout games, if not the best Fallout game of all, Fallout New Vegas, which was based on many of the recycled assets from Fallout 3, however with some marked improvements and changes in gameplay, chief among these being the addition of new weapons, ammo types, and some minor interface improvements. Because of this recycling of assets, Obsidian was ultimately able to complete New Vegas in the relatively short time frame of only 18 months. Now that we have the history of the Fallout franchise established, we can move on to some of the biggest issues which plague Fallout 76, and why this game so clearly represents the disconnect that has grown in recent years between Bethesda and its core fan base. Now one of the chief concerns many people have about Fallout 76 is how buggy this game is. Now bugs in Bethesda games are nothing new. We've all experienced or even exploited bugs, and some are even funny, like when a giant in Skyrim launches your player into space. But this game's bugs make the game border on unplayable. During the beta, users experienced a bug that made the entire game randomly delete itself from their hard drive on PC, and in fact, the game was so broken that it launched with a 54GB day 1 patch, for a 45GB game. Hell, with that and the second patch, which totaled in at a whopping 47GB, players have basically downloaded the entire game twice just in patches. And I mean, if you want to throw in the initial download, you could be up to over 150GB of downloads for this game, close to 200GB if you had the initial deletion glitch. So I mean, good luck to you, I guess, if you have a metered connection and you want to play Fallout 76. It ain't gonna happen, bud, sorry. You're gonna hit your data cap within about half of the first patch. So anyway, the game in its release state was completely unfinished. People reported end bosses disappearing, terrible performance issues, damage glitches in PvP, not to mention the fact that the server crashes if all 3 nukes are launched, and these are just the issues I've heard about from secondhand sources. Now we all expect games to glitch, especially Bethesda games, but we at least expect them to be functional upon release. And in addition to basically being unplayable upon launch, Some users found that they couldn't uninstall the game without buying it if they had played the beta. Alright, so the game doesn't run well and has bugs, I hear you say. So what? They can just refund it, no big deal. Well, it's funny you should mention that conveniently timed hypothetical question, because that brings me to my next point of, no, they can't refund it. Bethesda did not release Fallout 76 through Steam. As they have for every other game they've released, including the online-only MMO The Elder Scrolls Online, they released Fallout 76 solely through their Bethesda.net launcher, which has its own user and sales policies completely different from those of Steam. Chief among them, the no refunds on opened products, period policy. That's right, if you buy a game on Bethesda.net and you play even a second of it, no refund for you, sorry. Now this is a slap in the face to consumers, especially considering policies from Bethesda's main competitors in the PC games market, Steam, which allows users 2 hours of gameplay or 2 weeks of ownership on games before they can no longer return them. Honestly, the choice in where to release this game, as well as Bethesda's terrible policies and the completely broken state the game launched in, kind of makes it suspicious as to whether this was a deliberate move by Bethesda to ensure they wouldn't lose any revenue from people refunding their games after they realized just how terrible the game was at launch. Something that definitely would have happened if this game released on Steam. Now I can't prove that fact, and I wouldn't burn Bethesda at the stake just based upon the conjecture of one guy on YouTube with less than 100 subscribers, but just keep that in your head as you watch the rest of this video. And if by the end you think I'm completely idiotic and I'm just some worthless Bethesda hater who needs to shut up, I encourage you to share that opinion in the comments below. I'd really love to have a conversation about all this. Now, if the state of the game on launch, as well as the insane patch sizes and overall scummy policies by Bethesda regarding returns, weren't enough to make you think that maybe Fallout 76 isn't another Bethesda masterpiece, well then let's discuss the game itself and why this game so fundamentally doesn't fit the Fallout brand. Now I will preface this by saying I'm not a Fallout veteran. I have no nostalgic connection to the franchise. Fallout 4 was the first Fallout game I ever played before going back and playing Fallout 3 in New Vegas, and I've never played Fallout 1 or 2, so believe me that I have no rose-tinted glasses on when I discuss this matter. Now with that out of the way, let's move on. Fallout as a franchise is all about society rebuilding after the nuclear war, which wiped most of the world out with themes of man's folly, loneliness, and the unchanging nature of conflict, and surviving in a world which has turned on the beings which destroyed it. Bethesda just doesn't understand this anymore, and I honestly don't know if they ever did. Now don't misunderstand, Fallout 3 is great, but even back then it seems like Bethesda just preferred to focus on the guns, if you watch developer interviews from the time. This is Bethesda's main problem. They want the game to make you feel like a badass and to have it play like a modern FPS so bad that they completely lose sight of the main charm of Fallout as a franchise, which is the characters. Fallout at its core isn't a game about being a badass with a Gatling laser all the time, it's about characters and interacting with them. It's about freedom of choice and the ability to go where you want, when you want. Sure, it's fun to fight super mutants and feral ghouls, but at its core, all of this is just a small part of the overall experience. And it's these things which Bethesda has increasingly misunderstood, first in Fallout 4 with the focus on action, terrible dialogue wheel which limits your options, and player choice so limited you basically have to be the good guy. And it's this last blunder that I take the most issue with. Now, I always choose to be the good guy in games. I'm all Paragon in Mass Effect, I'm low Chaos in Dishonored, and I'm very high Karma in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, so I have no problem being the good guy. But when I have no choice but to be the good guy, it makes me feel like my choices are completely inconsequential and I don't even care about what I'm doing. This is what Fallout New Vegas did so right. It dropped you in as a blank slate and gave you the ability to be as good or as bad as you wanted. You can give companions away to slavers, have them eaten by cannibals, and you can join just about every faction one way or another, and in addition to all of this, the game is full of characters to love. From Veronica with her humorous and bubbly personality to Boone with his moody and gloomy persona, and even Joshua Graham with his intense anger and hatred. In essence, the genius of New Vegas lies in its pure freedom of choice, and it's this freedom that is reflected in the amount of the game's endings, which is far greater than any of the Bethesda-developed Fallout games. In addition to all of this, it understood that those important themes which I discussed earlier, with the main premise of the game simply being your survival on your own, with perhaps a few companions as you search for the man who shot you in the head, so you can complete your delivery. Now I could talk about New Vegas all day and how it had the best DLC, the best characters, and the best, well, everything besides gameplay. But now that I've covered how Bethesda doesn't understand many of the themes of Fallout and how it's reflected in their past endeavors in the franchise, I think it's best to get back on track and talk some more about Fallout 76. Fallout 76 takes all the previous issues Bethesda has had in their single-player games and amplifies it times 1 million. The focus on loneliness and exploring a war-torn world with the freedom to be who you want and make meaningful decisions has taken a complete backseat to gameplay, with Rust-like survival and online interactions. In essence, story has taken a complete backseat to gameplay, which isn't always a problem. For example, nobody cares that much about the story in Doom, we just want a fun game. But Fallout is an RPG series. Story is meant to be at the forefront. Another major issue with this game comes down to another unfathomable design choice by Bethesda, that being the inclusion of no human NPCs. You know, those things which I basically said were the lifeblood of the series? Yeah, well, they're not here. Instead, you just have to collect holotapes of characters speaking because every human character in the world is supposed to be a real person for some reason. And it's not like they couldn't put in human NPCs. The Elder Scrolls Online has humans and even elven NPCs, and it's larger than Fallout 76. Now, one major criticism of this game, which I don't fully agree with, that I've heard from some people like Angry Joe Show, and I'll have a link to his review in the description, is that this game is bad because it's just an asset flip. Now, I don't particularly have a problem with this. Fallout New Vegas was built heavily from recycled assets from Fallout 3, which is how Obsidian finished it so quickly, and it's a great game. An argument which I do agree with, however, is that charging people for minor recycled assets like haircuts and armor paint jobs is completely unacceptable, especially from a game which originally cost $60. The final issue which I want to talk about is far less important than the others and isn't anything new with Bethesda. It's been a problem since Fallout 4, but that's Bethesda's game engine. Bethesda's engine is outdated beyond belief. Bethesda's games look 3 years behind many of the other AAA games that have come out last year, not to mention the fact that the engine glitches and breaks beyond belief. Fallout 76's game engine is the same as Fallout 4's engine, obviously. However, what some of you might not know is that Fallout 4's engine is just an upgraded version of the engine that Skyrim, a game which came out in 2011, ran on. This engine is outdated today in 2018, but what's even more troubling is the fact that Starfield, Bethesda's next big game, as well as Elder Scrolls 6, are said to run upgraded versions of the same engine. Now, ultimately, Fallout 76 is a mess of poor design choices and a terrible lack of understanding of a franchise from a developer which just has no grasp on what it is that made the series great in the first place, and I honestly don't know that they'll ever understand. Alright, so I think I beat this dead horse enough. I've talked about why Fallout 76 sucks from a technological standpoint and why it sucks from a conceptual standpoint. So rather than nitpicking it further, I want to talk some more about Bethesda's real-life behavior recently. In addition to releasing this game basically broken and refusing to give people refunds, they can't even seem to care enough about their consumer to give them the things which they paid for to begin with. Now, while I didn't buy Fallout 76, many people were excited for it, and some went so far as to buy the $200 Power Armor edition of the game, which was supposed to come with the game, a replica Power Armor helmet, a glow-in-the-dark map of the game world, and a canvas tote bag. Now, most of this was delivered upon. However, when fans received their pre-orders, they discovered that the canvas bag they were promised was actually made out of nylon, a much cheaper alternative. This on its own is disappointing and enough to piss off many who had pre-ordered the game, especially when Bethesda announced they had no plans to replace them, as they couldn't get the resources to make the bags out of canvas. However, it's more infuriating when you realize that Bethesda made canvas bags. That's right, Bethesda made canvas bags and gave them out to influencers at a press event. And while these weren't the exact same bags that were meant to go in the pre-orders, it casts dispersion on their excuse that they couldn't get the resources needed to make them. Now, I do have to give Bethesda some credit. They eventually changed their policy and have since decided to replace the nylon bags with canvas for anyone that submits a support ticket, which is a nice thing to do. I mean, they're the ones who messed up, but hey, at least they're trying to fix it. But the thing is, they can't even do that without screwing it up. Yes, just days after the announcement that they would replace the bags, fans discovered that many of the individuals who had submitted a ticket had had their information leaked by Bethesda, leaving their names and addresses open to theft. Now, while information leaks and data breaches happen all the time, this, after everything else Bethesda has done with this game, just puts things over the edge. I mean, at this point, Bethesda is either grossly incompetent, or the studio this game was developed in was just built over an old cemetery or something. Like, this game has to be legit cursed. Ultimately, while Bethesda can improve on the technical issues and can make up for the bags and apologize for the leaks, Fallout 76 will forever be a black mark on a previously great company, and it has honestly eroded a large amount of trust Bethesda had with its consumers, who up to this point had a lot of faith in the company to put out quality products. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I know I really didn't strike when the iron was hot on this topic, but I have been making this video for quite a while and wanted to finally get it done and put it up. So let me know what you guys think about all this in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.